Hey everyone, welcome back. I am Mary Preston and I am reading through the Catholic Children's Bible. Let me show you the version that I've been using. This is the Catholic Bible for Children. It's got this pretty Noah's Ark uh, image on the front. So, what is happening is we are today going to read the story of Moses. If you missed the last one, we talked about Joseph, who was sold into slavery. He was in Egypt and he was real successful because he was born into just the right family. So today we're going to start some fun stories. I don't know, I haven't read these stories in forever long. I remember reading these when I was a kid. I kind of remember the stories, but let's see what it is that we're supposed to learn from the Catholic Bible for children about Moses. What's Moses going to teach us? So let's look at the pictures really quick because I always forget to show them, right? We've got we're by the river with the baby. Oh boy. Okay. I can't wait to read. I don't know what these images are exactly of. Which ones are Moses? Who's who? Who's who in this in these visuals, in these illustrations? All right. So remember, at any point you can fast forward. I'm going to try to indicate in my videos from now on where the story starts and ends if listening to the story is a little much and you just want my take at the end. Okay. So Moses, after Joseph died, I guess Joseph is dead, a new cruel Pharaoh took the throne in Egypt. He issued a command that no one dared disobey. When any Israelite boy was born, he was to be thrown into the Nile River. That is pretty terrible. One day, a woman from the tribe of Levi, one of the tribes of Israel, gave birth to a son. She loved him so much that she hid him so he would not be killed. Then 3 months later, entrusting him to the mercy of God, she went down to the Nile River with her daughter. She covered a basket with pitch so that it would float, and she placed her baby in it. She then lowered it into the water, telling her daughter, I can't stand to stay here. Remain here a while and watch over your brother. Not too far away, there was a spot where the water was deep and clear and calm. Pharaoh's daughter went down there with her handmaids. Seeing the basket floating among the reeds, she asked them, what is in that basket? The handmaids answered, it's a baby, and she ran over to take a look. The princess was a good and merciful woman. Moved with pity, she said to herself, it must be an Israelite baby. The baby's sister, hearing this, came out from the reeds where she had been hiding. She said, Princess, would you want me to call one of the Israelite women to take care of this baby? Pharaoh's daughter said, do it. The girl ran to her mother and told everything. The woman was overjoyed, and she ran forward to take the child in her arms. The princess, not knowing that she was speaking to the child's mother, said, I will pay you to care for him. When he was a bit older, his mother took him to the palace and handed him over to the princess. She named him Moses, a name that means I saved him from the water. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, being raised as if he were a prince. He was taught by the priests and the wise men, just as if he were being raised to lead his people one day. Certainly, the kind princess who had found Moses could not have imagined that he would one day become a great leader, a fierce enemy of her own Egyptian people. Moses grew up strong, well-mannered, and intelligent. He was well trained in the use of arms and leadership. Yet he hardly knew anything about the Israelites who were living as slaves in Egypt. He didn't concern himself with them until he found out that he himself was one of them. When he found out that he was one of them, young Moses approached the Israelites and found his brother Aaron, who told him all about Joseph and what had happened to his people since he had died. But Moses had been raised by the Egyptians, saved from death by Pharaoh's daughter. He found it difficult to believe that the Egyptians would treat the Israelites that poorly. He decided to go down to the Israelites and see for himself whether everything that he had heard was true. One day, he left the palace without telling anyone where he was going. Anxiously, he snuck down to the camp where the Israelites had to live and work. And then we're going to go on to the next story because not much happened there. First stages of the Exodus. So when he arrived there, Moses saw the Israelites were being forced to do hard labor. I'm assuming this is them doing hard labor. What was the illustrations again? Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow. That must be Moses in the burning bush there. We got a shepherd with his flock. Okay, that's the illustrations. When he arrived there, Moses saw the Israelites were being forced to do hard labor. They were constantly being lashed by their Egyptian taskmasters. When one of the Egyptians began to beat up one of the Israelites, he found that he could not control himself any longer. He walked over to the Egyptian and killed him. Believing no one had seen him, he took the body and buried it. He then returned to the royal palace, filled with concern. The next day, he went out to visit the Israelites again. He saw another Israelite being beaten up, but this time it was an Israelite beating up another Israelite. Moses stood between them and asked, "Why are you beating up your brother?" The man who was hitting the other man answered him, "Who made you judge between us? Are you going to kill me as you killed the Egyptian guard yesterday?" This is how Moses found out that everyone knew about what he had done. Even Pharaoh had heard about it, and his soldiers were looking for him to put him under arrest. Moses fled that instant, eventually finding himself resting against a well in the distant land of Midian. He sat there exhausted when he saw some young women approach the well to water their flocks. Some evil shepherds came up, though, and pushed them out of the way. Moses got up and helped the young women, and the shepherds fled. The young women gratefully told their father, a priest of Midian, what Moses had done for them. He entrusted his flock to Moses, and Moses eventually married one of the priest's daughters. That moved very quickly. This is how Moses, who had been raised in a palace, ended up as a shepherd. But God had something else in mind for him. One day, while with his sheep, Moses saw something incredible, a bush that was on fire, but which was not being consumed. Overwhelmed, he went over to the bush. There he heard a voice saying, "Moses, Moses, do not draw near. Take off your sandals because this is holy ground. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham and the God of Jacob." Moses, terrified, bent down to the ground. The voice continued, "I have seen the suffering of my people. I am placing them in your care. Go back to Pharaoh and tell him that you wish to lead Israel out of Egypt." Moses asked, "What will I tell the Israelites who follow me when they ask me, 'Who sent you?'" "You will answer that the Lord sent you. Do not fear, they will follow you. If Pharaoh prevents you from leaving, I will send plagues down upon him until he has to let you go." So Moses returned to Egypt. There, inspired by God, he spoke to the Israelites and they trusted him. He and his brother courageously went to Pharaoh and told him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, has sent me to tell you to let his people go." Pharaoh answered, "I don't know any Lord who can order me about. As for you, get out and don't go stirring up any trouble among your people." From that time on, Pharaoh ordered that the Israelites be watched more closely and that they be forced to work harder. Okay, so that's the end of those two. Next, obviously, is going to be the plagues in Egypt because Pharaoh doesn't let his people go. So for anyone who didn't feel like they wanted to listen to the story, right, we have first that we have a cruel Pharaoh who's now in power. Um, Israelite babies are, Israelite boy babies are supposed to be thrown into the river to die. And Moses' mother can't do it because she loves him so much. Like the other moms are just tossing their kids into the river. Like they don't love them very much. I don't know. Anyway, so she loves him so much. And so she puts him in a floating basket, floats him down the river. And the Pharaoh's daughter finds him, decides that he should be raised in the palace. Moses' mom is tasked with being the caretaker for Moses because unbeknownst to the Pharaoh's daughter, she is Moses' mother. Anyway, right? So Moses gets raised in the palace. He's like super good at all kinds of stuff. He's like real smart, real good with weapons. And but then one day he's like, "Oh, why is everybody saying that like we're mean to the Israelites, my people?" And he's like, "I don't believe it. I've been raised in the palace. These are super good people." And then he goes and he visits the Israelites and sees what they're up to, which is, basically they are uh, doing slave work. They are being lashed and beaten and killed as they are building and doing things for the Pharaoh and the Egyptians. Um, and so Moses is like super angry when he sees one of the Israelites getting beaten. And so he kills an Egyptian guard and then goes back to the palace, can't help himself, goes back down to the Israelites the next day. He's like, "Oh my gosh, my people are being so hurt and this is not good." And realizes that everyone knows he's killed this guard, runs away. becomes a shepherd because he's like, I don't know, nice to these women, marries the shepherd's daughter, um, and then is tasked with, through a burning bush that speaks to him with the Lord's voice, is tasked with freeing the Israelites from the Pharaoh. And Moses is like, burning bush. I don't know what they're like. How am I supposed to tell them that it's time to go? Right? Like, am I supposed to tell him that I saw this in like a burning bush? And the Lord is like, tell them it was the Lord, and they'll believe you. And turns out they did. Good for you. And the Lord is like, you tell that Pharaoh that we're taking my people. By the way, this is what it keeps saying. Let my people go. Right? Obviously, the Israelites are God's people. And then so Moses goes to do that, and Pharaoh's like, nah, dude, go away. So is the moral of this story. So a couple things to think about. Yeah, this Pharaoh is terrible. Agreed. I think what he is doing is very bad, telling all of these Israelites to throw their children into the river. Yes, this is not good. So one woman happens to send her son down the river, and he is found by the Pharaoh's daughter, and he is saved and raised in the palace. And then he is able to, because of his, because he is born in this other, um, uh, born in the palace, he has got some power and some education, right? So I'm assuming that, I don't know what the moral of that part of the story is, because like God could have showed up to anybody in a burning bush. Like he could have really picked any shepherd. When I think about this story, like him growing up in the palace, like, who cares, a little bit? Who cares about this? Maybe because now there's a boy who's grown up and all of the other boy children have been killed. I guess that may be part of it. I don't know. So what do we learn? What do we learn about Moses? I think, again, it is very important to be born into the right family, to the right people, right? God says repeatedly in the story that these are my people. And who he's talking about, obviously not the Egyptians. So that's interesting, right? So like Pharaoh's shitty, certainly. But like, what about the rest of the Egyptians? I don't know. Are they just all shitty people? Like they're all just terrible humans, and they, because of that, are not God's people? Or are they just not born into the right lineage, which seems to be the theme of the Old Testament so far, is that you really just need to be born into the right family to be chosen. And then if you do that, and if you happen to be one of the children not thrown into the river, and if you happen to be raised in the palace, luckily, as the only one lucky enough to get found by the Pharaoh's daughter, uh, then if you take care of your people by killing guards and then running off and being a shepherd, then you get to be the carrier of the message. I don't know. I don't really know what we're learning about any of this, except that it's kind of like a fun story. Like it's always, like one of those apocalyptic stories, right? Where like somebody just luckily survives. Like that's like good. I'm glad Moses survived. Like that really sucks. Pharaoh should not have been doing that. That is terrible. People should not have had to do that. And luckily Moses survived. And I guess because of his hardships, becomes like real strong, right? Like that's a cool story, right? Like hardships, right? Like I could have been killed, raised by his mom, but I bet he doesn't even know she's his mom, and then like sees what's happening to his people, and then he's like super angry about it because he's so enraged, and then right, and so now he's going to be the leader of his people. I don't know. Cool. Okay. But like, what are we learning religiously? I don't know, again, like just be born into the right family. Definitely do that. Otherwise you're kind of screwed, right? Because like, well, I don't know if you know the story of Moses, but I know the plagues is coming up. And because of Pharaoh, there's going to be a lot of stuff that happens. And it's because he won't free God's people, right? Which is not the Egyptians. Let's be very clear that the Egyptians are not, in this story, God's people. God's people are the Israelites. So I don't know. You tell me. You tell me what we've learned. And then join me in the next video and we will talk about the plagues, which is definitely an interesting story. Lots to learn.